Welcome back from the break. I'm joined in the studio today by Sven Erik, Heidrun, and Gunnar. And we'll be having a conversation around some questions. And if you have any questions from the audience, please send them in, and we'll try to include them today. So, welcome. Our first question today is, what do you feel was key to succeeding in your academic journey? And if you had it to do over again, would you do it the same? Do you want to start?
If I had to do it over again, I would do it the same. That's I would say like that because I really enjoyed my career. Thinking back on it, there's been hardship, of course, along the way. But I think what I've had both academic and outside academic career, so I think embracing opportunities is kind of my main motivation. You know, don't get locked into a thought of a given future because there are so many things that can change and alter that. So to take the opportunities that comes and be open towards them, I think that has been my most important skill.
How about you?
Yeah, I addressed this partly in my presentation, but what I would like to add is that I forgot to mention all those mentors and important people that were important in my career. And I was really lucky that, for example, during my PhD time, I was at a conference, and afterwards a professor came to me and he said, "I think you need help." And he invited me to come a couple of months at his university, and I got really good co-supervision by him. And also when I studied here in Trondheim, I had a very good senior colleague who always read my papers, who met me with questions. And I think it's really important to have these people who care for you. So that's very important in a career. Yeah.
True. How about
Yeah.
you, Gunnar?
I started more than 30 years ago, and maybe the most important thing was that I very early got invited, or I think I invited myself into some research project that had already been funded. So we had I would just directly put into the research phase and producing research, and it also ended up in quite many publications. But I would also say that I have always enjoyed doing what I'm doing. So doing research and also collaboration with the colleagues, both local, national, international. And I have also enjoyed writing and publishing both the research but also other teaching materials. And what was also important to get started and get going was that we actually managed to get our publications published. They were accepted because that was a great, every time that happened. And of course, so that you get some successes also is important. Also, I had good colleagues, and I will also say that I had always had a very supportive administration. I think that is underestimated, that there are a lot of people that think we have too much administration at the universities, but then a good administration is something that you don't see because they do everything for you before you, and you don't notice until you have to do it yourself. I've been also head of departments. I know that it is a lot of things that can go wrong and that you have to do if you don't have the administration that can fix things for you. And also we had in the golden age, maybe we had a lot of funding for traveling and for other things so that we didn't need to apply for that. That was also important, and also the freedom that I had in my work. So I can decide what I wanted to do, what kind of research project I wanted to work on. That's what completely up to me, and that was great. So, and I also enjoyed traveling to conferences and meet colleagues from other places on the globe, and start. That also triggered a lot of cooperation. So I think some years ago I tried to count how many co-authors I had from other countries, and it was more than 150. So that was I became part of a big network. That was also important for me. But if I go back, so what would I do if I start over again? I think I would have believed even more in the ideas I had in the beginning, because I started some project also together with some of my colleagues, and that were much better than we thought in the beginning. We received some criticism, and we started we started to work with other things because we were criticized. But we should have continued with the ideas we had. We should have had better believe in ourselves, and maybe also I will started to work internationally earlier at an earlier point, and also we had some other projects that could have been commercialized that we didn't do that. I see that in retrospect, that we had some great ideas, way before others. But I think also I probably would have said no to many of the things that I said yes to. So, of course, I have learned a lot about that, but it comes with a cost, and that is extra work. Yeah.
So the next question is, what's your opinion about the importance of a person's professional network versus their qualifications? You want to?
Well, I think we need one basic qualification if you want to get further in academia, and this is we need this PhD. So that you can have a very good network. If you don't have your PhD, it won't help you.
Yeah.
But after that, of course, the network is really important, because you want to be part of a bigger scientific community to which you contribute. You need to be read. You need that people know that you are there and what you're working on. So yes, network is as well important.
Yeah, so qualifications is what we develop all the time, right? So those are of course important in work life in general, but I think networking has been very critical, and international networking, national networking, local networking, and trying to learn and understand the organization you work in order to play with it and be able to promote your work as well is important, because everybody, is fighting for a small bit of sun. So to be out there and talking to people, open, that's very important, I think, and have as large network as possible, because that will help you once funding dries up or you have to switch jobs or whatever.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are two things when I think about professional networks, and one is also that there is a lot of professional organizations, and I have had great pleasure being part of professional organizations in my field, international organization, that arrange a lot of conferences, and then you have special interest groups or working groups that you can take part of, and in that way, it's also easy to get an international network. So I have done that myself. So and also coming from Norway actually is also very positive, because you come from a friendly small country. You are well funded. They don't need to pay you anything. You only need to have access to the internet. So that is also have been easy to travel and also to both go on longer and shorter stay, and also to establish collaboration. And international networking has been very important for me, as I said. Most of my international colleagues I met during the conferences, not during the sessions, but in the pub afterwards or at the dinner, or then we have also invited ourselves to some of the best groups in our field in the world, and try to get start cooperation started, and it has been it's been a pleasure actually to do that, and everybody is very welcoming, and I think that is also based on both what we have, of course, what the competence that we had, what we had been working on, but also the fact that we come from the Scandinavia. That I think that is one of the things. There are also the advantage of international networking is that you get you be part of a bigger group, and we see now in order to get funding these days, the consortiums they become bigger and bigger, and if you want to compete on the grants now, then it seems you have to be part of a big research group, an international group. And also, of course, co-authorships with international colleagues. We also do co-supervision, so many of my PhD students, we have hybrid supervision. Some are present, for instance, in Tromsø, others are online from other parts, especially from Europe. And also it's easier to send students abroad if you already have established the collaboration, and also send yourself. And of course, it's quite motivating. The downside is that, of course, you have to maintain these relationships, but those that you are collaborating with, they are at least as busy as you, so they don't expect that you are contacting them every day or every week or even every month. And of course, you need to have the funding to do that.
That's true.
I'm just thinking there are many PhDs probably listening to us, and I also would like to say a network doesn't only need to be strategic and international and get in contact with these important people, but a network can also be thought of as a community, and it's important to have good relations with your peers and your fellow PhD colleagues. And in my field, I see many of the professors, they continue publishing, and the co-writers they are the same people that they did the PhD with 30 years ago. So I recognize that also your peers are your network. It's not only about being very strategic, it's just a bit being recognizing that producing science is a community effort.
That's so true.
Yeah, and I think that's what you touched about there is very, very important. So the peers at your time, you tend to kind of, well, those are the ones you hang out with, and they do interesting work, but you look up to the stars in the field, but you know, in 20 years, they are not the stars in the field anymore. They are retired. So then the ones you did work with at the time are the professors you are going to collaborate with. So I think that's a very important point. Make as many friends as possible, because those are your future peers, right?
That's so true. Yeah. So a little bit on the same topic of networking, but different. Do you think aspiring academics should spend time on a social media presence? Why or why not? I know Twitter is used a lot for science communications. What do you think about that?
I'm really bad at this myself. And I think many Norwegian scholars are, if we compare us to UK, for example. I think it is important because I realized myself when colleagues get a project and then they post something on social media, you say, oh yeah, there's something happening. And if there's no post, you don't see that there's something happening. But this also takes a lot of time and skills. Yes, I think it's important to do like I say, don't do like I do.
Right.
Yeah, no. For me, it's the same. We are as a center, as a research center, we are forced to have a public appearance all the time, meaning that we need to publish on social media, etc. And the Research Council is following this. They're checking our accounts every second week, etc. It's kind of in the contract with the Research Council. So it's very important for them that we showcase what we do. So it's becoming like a requirement and a necessity. And you know, the only social network I'm really on is a professional network, and I follow what goes on in the field, and I would encourage everybody to do it. You know, as a PhD, you potentially don't have too many things to post every time, but we have all our PhD write blogs throughout the year, like short pieces about their work at that point in time, and then we publish it through the center, and it gets a lot of attention. So. it's a good way to communicate, and it's the way of the day. You know, it's what happens today. So to not be on it is like that's not necessarily good.
Right.
So it's almost like a force you have to play with.
Okay. What about you, Gunnar? You've probably seen
No,
quite an evolution of
So
communication.
I should also have been more active. I have to admit that. But luckily, I have others in my research group that are active and that promote the activity that we do.
So you would recommend that for
Yeah, but
PhD students?
I recommend that you also try to be visible in social media. And for instance, if I in a committee and evaluate new postdocs or PhD and also junior faculty, I always check LinkedIn, for instance, what they have written about themselves in LinkedIn. And if you see, there is also a transition now when it comes to publications. It started with +1, and which is one of the first mega journals. And we see now that gradually others are following. But what was then in the purpose or the plan behind +1 was that it was not only citations that were important, but it was also attention in social media. How many tweets does this paper get? How many times has the paper been mentioned in Facebook and other social media? And how many downloads, for instance? And other these things. They is and also comments online in the journal. So the idea now is more for some of the journals is more that the importance of the paper is based on the total sum of attention that it gets, and then we are not only counting citations.
At the same time, many PhD students, they are stressed as they are. So I wouldn't surrender myself to these media logics of the journals neither. They want to have the clicks, they're trying to sell something. I just don't get stressed of this, I think, and because it's also part of a gamification of academia. How many clicks do you have? But there's also some contra-trend in the moment. For example, ResearchGate recently removed this scoring. So, yeah, don't get stressed. That's my message.
Yeah, but what you should do is try to tweet about your papers and mention them in social media. So I know that some are very good at that, and then they get a lot of attention and citations also, and make the papers available open access also, so that it can be accessed by others all over the world.
Yeah, so I agree with what you say, but there is this other trend that, you know, the ones who fund us, they have a need to measure us in all kinds of ways. So we are measured no matter what if we want it or not. So being able to show to this when you apply for funding can be critical. And I've been there having no funding and had to leave academia altogether. And that's, you know, at that point you feel horrible. Oh, this is all I ever wanted to do, and now you have to leave it because there's no more money, because we perhaps weren't diligent enough in that process. So I think it's stressful, but don't try to be stressed about it. But you are being measured when it comes to new funding, etc. So it's important to remember this at least. Don't forget about it. It's becoming more and more important.
True.
Yes, but I certainly agree with all of this. But then also the Research Council is concerned with this because the Research Council is measured by the Ministry of Education. And again, I think with all of these things going on, it's important to keep also the focus on what we are trying to do is to do research, to find out things about the world, and maybe apply them so that they're socially relevant. So all of these performance measures, they are there. But the most important thing is that we're doing good work. And if you're just trying to satisfy everyone, and these things are dynamic. I mean, now they are discussing that maybe we shouldn't have the telecom system, that maybe it shouldn't be so important for institutions longer, how much we publish, because it's also political. So this system is always in movement. Academia is measured on other things today than they were 30 years ago.
True.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think, you know, if we were to be able to do our jobs, but when you come, there is a level of politics also, because I'm involved in a huge program, and that program is under criticism. And it's the Research Council ordered a report. You know, the report was very critical of the whole program, the SFI program, and they said, you know, we get very little out of for the money we put in, and that becomes a message to politicians, who in the end decide the funding to the Research Council. So the Research Council also needs our stories and work to talk to the politicians, because they are also fighting for their funding. So fighting for funding is something that you will experience in your work life in all kinds of work. Even if you work in private companies, etc., fighting for what you do is what you will do always through your career. You have to promote your work. You have to work with project managers, management, to get them to see what you do, because there are thousands of ideas out there. So that fight must be there. But the metrics, I don't like the metrics. But they are there, and you can't ignore them. That's my main point, I think.
True.
Yeah, but as you heard, we know about that we should be more active, but we are not, so that is...
Right. But you would recommend it, I guess, to
yes,
PhD students, within reason.
Yeah.
So what skills or traits do you lean on the most in your current position? We'll start with you, Gunnar.
I'm in the research group leader, so leadership is, of course, something that I lean on, and also communication and collaboration with others. Of course, I have been working with different fields, mostly with diabetes technology, but also with other things, and I have that also with me and try to follow what is happening. So you also have to find time to update yourself. But also general knowledge about research methods and how to do research. I'm a supervisor and co-supervisor for quite many PhD and master students, and also the connection that I have established, personal connections to others, is also important. So that when I know that I can contact others if there are some questions that I cannot answer myself, or if we want to start some new projects or go in new directions, then it's easy to use your contact network. And also I think it's knowledge about how things work in the university, for instance, is also important, that so that you don't need to ask every administration and others every time you're going to do some changes, or I think that's
yeah, those are all important. How about you, Stein?
No, I totally agree, and with everything you said. But I think one way to sum that up is that you need to be curious and able to learn all the way through your career. It never stops, right? So this is a never-ending process. But you know, in my daily work now, I rely heavily on my network, which I've never stopped doing. And going places, you think, you know, why am I going to this conference, or what am I doing here? I've been doing that a lot in the industry as well. But then you suddenly meet one person which can change or make things happen. So you never know who you meet. That's an important aspect. So networking is very, very important. Being open and curious and wanting to learn all the time. You never get... there is not enough information that you cannot unlearn or that you should learn. And I think now as a researcher, I'm actually so lucky that I'm actually working on what I did in my PhD, which I never thought I would do again at some point in my career. And in my scientific work, I actually rely heavily on what I learned during my PhD. Mm-hmm. And so the science, having a lot of time to focus on a specific topic is something that goes away after the PhD. You'll be involved in more and more projects, having a consistent amount of time to sit down and really work on something hard. That's not necessarily coming back to the same extent. and that should be appreciated in the PhD. And I rely actually heavily on the knowledge that I learn in such a process today.
I think what you're saying is really important because PhDs have a lot to do, but still I never had so much time anymore afterwards in my life. And what we in our field, sociology, political sciences, it's also important to read a lot. And what I realized is that I'm building very much on the things that I read as a master student and PhD students, because this time when you really have time to discuss and are being taught by others about the theories, it's not coming back. And I think that's important to be aware of.
So kind of time management and yeah, that becomes real important.
Yes.
Yes. So one more question from our list, and then we'll move on to some audience questions. How long before you finished your PhD did you start applying for jobs? Or how early in your PhD career did you start applying for jobs?
I addressed this in my presentation, but it was a bit special because I moved countries for personal reasons. But I heard from the network that there was a project application that got in, which will have a postdoc, and then I still had 5 to 6 months of my PhD left, or writing left. And that was really motivating because I knew that this postdoc position is interesting for me. So then I applied for this just after handing in my PhD, and I also maybe got a bit quick in finishing it because I knew maybe this would be an opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, no, I have to think back actually, but I wanted to continue in academia at that point, so I started applying for postdoc positions. I think I had one unsuccessful and then one successful application, so at least a year before. But if you have an idea of what you want to do, starting as early as possible, targeting that type of job. If it's in a company, for example, you can even start approaching the company or read about them and prepare for what's coming, because then also networking can help you get a job. And so as early as possible, if you know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just as early as possible. I'm also have been sitting in postdoc committee application employment committees, and then it's allowed to apply for these postdocs before you're finished. But for the committee, it's an uncertainty factor. Yeah. If you say 1 year before, I think this person would be ranked relatively low.
No, but that was writing the grant.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Then you write the grant. It would be granted close to your finishing your PhD. So I started writing grants earlier. So yeah, that was.
Oh yeah. That makes sense.
So I think my personal experience is a bit outdated, but what I recommend is, to start to plan this and identify potential places that you want to go, and also try to meet with person or with potential colleagues in person, not only send emails. At least try to connect on Teams or Zoom, or so that you also show your face and show interest. And also it's if you have some ideas, that will also be great. But you should do your preparation first. You should look at what kind of research, what kind of projects are they doing, and then try to write yourself into that group. I think that is, but personal contact through your supervisors network, through other PhD students networks that you have met, maybe at conferences. I think that is also a good thing. We have a problem in Norway with the way that we recruit PhD students. It takes too long time from they apply to they can get yes or no for if they get the position or not, and also it's a lot of time to apply for new positions for the research council. There is one the only arrangement I think works as I want it to work is actually industrial PhD, because then I think that is an excellent arrangement that we should have for all kinds of PhD, because if you want to have an industrial PhD, then you get it in a couple of weeks, and it should be the same for postdocs also, that you can get that in a couple of weeks. I have been in some postdocs committee also. It take too much time in order to evaluate. So people have moved to other countries and other positions.
So this question is a little bit related to the previous one. Someone asked, as someone who has worked with the industry but feel PhD provides a good opportunity to skill up quick, what ways can one still be involved with the industries during the PhD to make our projects practical and industry ready?
Well, in our field, we work with the industry all the time. That's the way we work, because in our field, the industry is the ones who have the most potent technology. So if we want to work with the best technology, we have to work with industry. You know, working with industry can be hard to get into their thinking, but you need to be able to do that. And the only way to do that is to contact and talk and discuss about opportunities. And you know, if you come with an idea that you think is great, and they say that's not great, leave that idea and listen to what they have to say, because it takes a lot of work to convince somebody that an idea is great, and that convincing is not just necessarily something you have the time to do if you have never worked with them before. That's my point. Yeah.
All right. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to that?
Don't ask a sociologist.
but you know, contacting, you know, you would be amazed what people are willing to, you know, they will take you in and talk to you and discuss to you and listen to you, but you need to be open to their challenges.
Good advice. So I think this is also maybe for you, Sven-Erik. The question is, you said that it's okay to quit if it happens to you. What are the chances that you can get another job if you quit the PhD without finishing?
We've had some people in our group who have not finished. There are not too many, but it happens, you know. So, and there is in Norway today, the unemployment rate for engineers is very, very low. It's almost zero. So I talk for engineers, and in that sense, getting a job, having left a PhD, I think many in the industry would understand that. As I said, 7 out of 10 companies don't even want to hire people with a PhD because they think it's too much. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. You need to start applying for jobs. It's your skills. It's the way you present yourself to the company. And if they need those skills, you should get a job. In today's job market for engineers, at least, I don't know about the other fields, it's very, very good. So I wouldn't think that's a problem.
Do you have anything to add from sociology, or?
I think partly it's true also for the social sciences, humanities. If you apply for a job outside of academia and you're not finished, then you can explain yourself and have good reasons. It doesn't necessarily be a complete no. I myself know many people who haven't finished their PhDs and they have really good jobs. Mm-hmm. But inside academia, I think these times where you can get become a professor despite not finishing your PhD, which was possible 20 to 30 years ago, I think that's over.
Yeah.
But and you make a very good point. You know, the reason can be very simple. You know, doing research was not for me. That was not what it didn't fit my way of working. I wanted to do something else. That's the only reason you need. It can be as simple as that. And people will accept and understand that.
Yeah, or the project was not the right project for you.
Yeah.
So that could also, okay, sometimes you make mistakes. And you have this, I don't know if it still is used, but I remember if you go back some years, there were some people that called themselves ABD.
Yes.
And that was all but a dissertation. That for those who have finished their coursework but not finished their writing up their dissertation, so they call themselves ABDs. It is, yeah. I think you are allowed to also to have some failures, if you can say it's a failure, or make some mistakes, and hopefully you also learn something from. Maybe you have one or two publications, maybe you have some additional courses or additional network that you have achieved during the process, even though you didn't manage. And it could also be all things outside and factors. For instance, something happened in the research group with the supervisor with the project, and so it could be things that you don't have control of at all. So
That's so true.
Yeah, I would just like to add, it's allowed to change your mind. That's the point, and people do that all the time. People switch jobs all the time. Why do you switch a job? Did you like the job you were in? No, I had another opportunity. It's as simple as that. And sometimes a project can look great on paper for you, and then you start working on it, and it turned out to be something completely different. Because describing something on paper, going through some interviews, doesn't necessarily describe how it's going to be. So.
Right.
One recommendation is that if you are in such a position, or that you consider to leave, but you have a hope that you can restart your PhD project again, then you should finish all your courses, because then you only need to complete the dissertation at a later point. It's much more difficult if you have, say, you lack 10 or 20 ECTS.
That's a good point.
True. So kind of on the same note, but more within the PhD process, this person asks, what's your advice to someone who was working on a topic that is now not in high demand, and it's become difficult to get funding from the Research Council, so it's not relevant anymore to the industry? What should be the next step? Changing projects, like leaving academia? Like, how easy is it to change that kind of thing midway?
Is it midway?
I would assume. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's happened to me several times. That's the way of life. Things change. That's what I talk about, embrace opportunities, right? And there are hypes in research as well. There are trends, and trends come and they go. You have experienced the machine learning winter, as you said, or the AI winter. Yeah, AI winter, and there have been many of those. Yeah. So, and when I finished my PhD, I didn't work on it for the next 12 years of my career, even more. I don't know. Yeah. And then it came back because of technological developments that made it possible. So now we can introduce it as a product into the market. But at the point I was working on it, it was not ready. It was way too expensive to be used. So you can wait it out. And then you have, I heard about some, I don't remember exactly the Nobel Prize, but they had continued working on the project that everybody left. There were only like 2 research groups left in the world who worked on the project. Believe in your ideas, right? Which you also said. And then eventually they broke the code. They made it work, and then suddenly, 20 years later, they get the Nobel Prize. So you never know. But the funding aspect is a challenge. If you don't get funding, then you need to be creative.
I think the pandemic, we have seen a great example that how important that at least some believe in their ideas, because those who worked with mRNA for quite many years, they never got funding. Nobody believed in them, and I know that has really helped the whole world with the new vaccines that they could come up with in such a short time. I was once in a PhD committee, and there was a lot of discussion about the PhD candidate, because he had used quite many years, and this was in technology, so therefore some fields the development goes quite fast. So what he started to work on had been adapted by the industry. And we had a discussion in the committee whether he should pass or not. But the fact that he published some papers very early that showed that at that time it was a novel idea that he worked on was the reason that he also were granted the PhD. So it is also important to timestamp your work. I don't know if this is the case, and also see if there are some other ways to maybe slightly change or dig into some of the sub-problems that might give you the necessary novelty, if that is the point. Or is it just the funding that has gone out? It was a bit unclear for me from the question. But there are ways to try to overcome this. And I also have had a PhD student that where we have quite totally changed the projects during the way because we discovered something that were very interesting, and then we took a turn in the project.
So this next question, which might be our last question, is how do I come into a position to get a postdoc? Can I apply by myself, or do I need a supervisor in order to apply for funding? How does this process work?
It can be very different. I think your supervisor applying for funding and then you get a postdoc position is also part of the things that maybe don't happen so often now than like 10 years ago, because it's considered good practice that you should go to another institution. Mm-hmm. So the best way would be to be on these email lists, get all of this announcement of postdocs in different projects and apply.
Yeah, I think here networking is critical, and then you know it's becoming so hard to get these postdocs. There are so few positions out there, and I would try to aim then to have a good network in order to be able to apply with a network. You know, I'm going to work with these and these people because that will strengthen your work. It will seem like a larger project, and it's not only a postdoc, right? It's a larger collaboration. So to forge that collaboration, I think is important. I think you know there are also serendipities in life. I think I was lucky because in my PhD program, we presented every year to the research council. We met up in these places, and all the PhDs in the program presented to the research council. And one of the persons who was on this committee, evaluating committee, that person was also in the postdoc committee. I heard that later. But since that person had seen me present several times, knew the group I came from, I was lucky that I was supported in a sense. So, but I only heard that afterwards. But you know, those are also facts of life. So don't underestimate also the way that networking can feed back to you in such instances.
True.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to get a postdoc. But I have got several postdoc funded by the regional health authorities, and they also have prioritized postdocs. So there also might be other ways, not only the research council, that you can look for funding. And also if you don't manage to get a postdoc directly, maybe there are some short-term contracts that can be offered, for instance, as part of one of the European funded projects that we have quite many of us. So that can be a way in. So you should not give up.
No, and that's a good point. I actually remember that now because I think after my PhD we had a research project which was a 2-year funding, which was not like a PhD or a postdoc project. It was an innovation project, and during that time I actually did these 2 applications. So I did not follow my own advice. I didn't start early. I actually made it happen afterwards.
Just a postdoc, this is also important, should qualify you. So if there is 2 years of funding on a research position, be careful that your contract is defined as this is a researcher position, so that you have the opportunity to have a postdoc later at the same institution if you want to stay.
important
good
point.
advice. So we should wrap up. Our time's almost done, but I wanted to thank you guys for joining me for this conversation. It was super informative, and I hope everybody out in the audience could get something from this. Super interesting and full of information. So we're going to take a break for lunch, and I hope you'll join us for the second half of the day when we'll talk with folks in the public sector.